Everybody, welcome to the Contextual Christian Church Bible Study, where today we're going to read Second Chronicles chapter 4, verses 6 to 18. I'm going to pray it in. Everybody bow your heads. All right. Father, thank you for getting us on this Bible study today as we're going to get into some more details on the things made for the house of God and some of the other items for the house of God, some reminders, some calculations we're going to get into, and some practice. So this will still be good practice for us. And in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. So last time we had finished up chapter 3, but when we did, we had gotten to the point where Solomon started to make the most holy house, or the holiest of holy area, Solomon's temple, or in other words, the house of God. And we started off with building the size of it and everything being about, I think it was 105 feet, if I remember correctly, in length, but it was 35 feet tall and 35 feet wide. And we had talked about the cherubims, or in other words, the angels, which wings had spanned from one side of the room to the middle, touching the wing, to the other side of the room. So we had them spread out, but their wings were spraying out like that, split like that. And we had talked about how the house had been, they had overlaid the house, so put a layer of gold over everything on the inside. And when we had finished up with chapter 3, we had finished up with the wings of it, the size of it, and the pillars that were there as well, and how they were set up. Then we got into chapter 4 for the first 5 verses, where they started to make an altar of brass, and then they started making vessels for it. But when they set this up, it had oxen, 12 that were underneath it, that three facing north, south, east, west on the outside. So their backside or hindquarters were inside towards the middle. And it had a whole specialty design on it. And that's where we ended up finishing with, was continuing the depiction of that in verse 5, where we talked about how the thickness of it was a handbreadth. So it was like the width of your hand was how thick it was. That's a lot, by the way. And that's pretty much it. And we brought up that it could hold 3,000 bats, which was, I believe it was 150 gallons or something like that. Actually, it was actually more than that. But anyways, so that's where we finished up with, as we're going to continue in the depictions of the building of Solomon's temple with today's first reading, as Chris will be ready to read.
Hold on, let me turn that bad down. All right. So starting today in Second Chronicles chapter 4, verses 6 through 10. He made also 10 lavers? Lavers?
Lavers.
Okay. He made also 10 lavers and put 5 on the right hand and 5 on the left to wash in them. Such things as they offered for the burnt offerings, they washed in them. But the sea was for the priests to wash in. And he made 10 candlesticks of gold according to their form, and set them in the temple, 5 on the right hand and 5 on the left. He made also 10 tables, and placed them in the temple, 5 on the right side and 5 on the left. And he made 100 basins of gold. Furthermore, he made the court of the priests, and the great court, and the great court, and the doors of the court, for the court, and overlaid the doors of them with brass. And he set the sea on the right side of the east end, over against the south. What? He set the sea on the right side of the east end, over against the south. All right, give me a second. Let me double check that real quick. So lavers are pots. Let's see, properly round. That is a chafing dish for coals or a cauldron for cooking. Okay, so a pot. All right,
Yeah,
so
but I think you should emphasize the size of it. Like this is big enough for people to wash in.
a cauldron. It's like so. You seen the Wicked Witches of the West, or what's that one movie with three witches, sister witches? They brewing up a
Most
potion or
people wouldn't know
something.
what a cauldron is. You could just say a big pot big enough to wash in.
Okay, oh,
The
yeah.
thing is
So we
remember,
got
you got to think when you're explaining it, you got to explain it in a way that's easy enough for like the average Joe or even a 5-year-old to understand. And
right.
no
That's why I
matter
was
how
gonna go
you
with
spin it, if you use cauldron, it ain't gonna work. But if you say pot, what do people think of when they think of a pot?
like a cooking pot. So that's why I was gonna bring
Yeah,
up like the like how you always see in the witch movies, like even in the Wizard of Oz, that big pot that she was mixing up the potion in. That's what depiction I was gonna go with. There's a lot of like all kids have seen movies like Disney movies that had those in them. So
yeah, yeah, that'll work. Just had to fix the word
gotcha,
cauldron was all.
gotcha. All right, so 10 real big pots, big enough for you to bathe in, and then he puts five of them on the right and then five on the left, and that's for where they wash the burnt offerings. And the priests weren't washing in those though; they were washed in the sea. They said so. Any like general body of water,
Good.
and
But what
10
did they
candles.
wash in it?
What in the sea?
No, in the pots.
Oh, I already said burnt offerings.
Oh, I didn't hear the offerings part. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and then
Now look up
we
the definition for the word candlesticks. And not the definition, but the original word, what it says.
in the BDB,
No, no, the
or
word,
you
not the
talking about Google it?
definition. No, on the dictionary, look up the word for candlestick and then look up what the original word is. How does it pronounce it?
Okay. Um, in the original sense of, I think it's the HT16 lamp,
I said not the definition. I said in the
origin
definition,
from.
the original pronunciation. The original
I
word
don't
for
think I
it.
understand what you're talking about. Are you talking about the mineral?
Menorah.
Mineral. Oh,
It's a
oh,
menorah. You've probably seen menorahs in Hanukkah when Jewish folk have that
yeah.
candlestick holder. That's why I said it's not the definition, it's the original word. Menorah is the Hebrew word for the candlestick holder.
Okay. Yeah, that flew
So,
over my head. Because I looked at the origin from. That's where I was looking at. So all right.
well, that's why I said the original word, not the origin. That origin is where it comes from. The original word is just what's the word in Hebrew. So it's the
Gotcha.
menorah. So that's the candlestick. So we're talking about the same thing that Jewish folk use today when they're celebrating Hanukkah, the candlestick holder. That's why when you look at it, it made the 10 candlesticks of gold according to their form. That candlestick holder had 10 spaces on it, five on the right hand,
Right.
five on the left.
Okay,
Now,
I get what you're saying.
here goes a question. Why, when we see the menorah, does it have nine and not 10 today?
I would have no clue.
Okay. Thomas?
Don't know.
Okay. Charles?
Don't know. I had a separate question after you're done.
All right. The reason that menorah that we see today during Hanukkah has 9 and not 10 holders is because it's not the same use. The reason for the 9 is because it's celebrating a holiday of a miracle where there was a war going on. This is way later after the Bible times. So this is like in the early centuries, like 300, 400. I forget exactly when. But there was a war that happened between the tribe of Judah and the Maccabees. And during that war, there was a lot of people that had died, but they weren't able to save anybody or anything, or at least they thought they couldn't, because they only had enough oil to last one night. It's only enough to last that one night. But the miracle of the situation was that the oil ended up lasting for 8 nights. So the middle one of the 9 is used as one single candle to represent the original oil that was able to last for the 8 days so they could find their dead and injured and save the injured and bury the dead. And what you would do is you would light that middle one and use that to light the candles for the current night. So, like the first night, you'd have 2 candles on it, one to light, one to put on. And then the second night, you'd have 3 candles, the same one from the first night, and then 2 to represent that second night. The same with the third night would be 4 candles, that original candle just to light the others, and then 3 for the third night, and so on and so on. So it actually has nothing to do with this situation here. That's why the menorah on Hanukkah has a different number than here. Now, what was your question, Charles?
It was on the when I went to the original the phonetic for candlestick. When you said menorah, I was like, oh, that sounds familiar. But the phonetic has MEN-O-RAW. We can still do menorah even though the O and the R have that dash in between it, right?
Well, say it together.
If you say it fast, and yeah, that's why I was like, oh yeah, if you say
You
it
see what I'm
fast, then
saying? It
menorah.
sounds the
Yeah,
same.
yeah.
Like you could enunciate it, men o ra, but is that how you enunciate any word? No, like you enunciate it, you give the emphasis for it. Yeah. So menorah, menorah. The emphasis on the end is a little different, but remember also we're dealing with how people. It's a common word today. We're dealing with people that are reading it the same as before. You guys have probably noticed when we're listening to the Bible that the way they pronounce some of these words is way different than what we see in the phonetic, right? You
Right.
guys have all noticed
Right.
that. Well, this is the way that people would normally read it today, not as people would read it back then with the original language. That's why when I asked you guys if it matters to you if we read it in the original or read it how people would read it today, because there's nothing wrong with how he read it, but he's not reading it as in the original. So some of the names are not necessarily accurate. That's why we had the phonetic. That's why
And
I
like
gave
you
you guys that option. Yeah.
and like you said earlier, it's a known menorah is it's a known name.
Yeah. Like even if you're not Jewish, you've heard the word menorah before. Like it's so known. Like even outside of Judaism, people know. Oh, menorah, candlestick holder. So with that being said, go ahead and continue, Chris. Unless anybody else has a question. All right, then go ahead, Chris. Continue with the explanation.
Got it. All right. So after the candlesticks of gold or the menorah, we got the 10 tables. Again, we got 5 on each side. But then it goes. He made 100 basins of gold. So gold wine bowls, and then let's
You
see,
said wine bowls.
yeah, bowls for wine.
Did it say it was for wine?
Um, No, that's just the BDB. It just says a bowl, so gold bowl.
Yeah. Remember, don't add something that's not there. And this is why I said you probably didn't go to the full Strong's Concordance. You went straight to BDB, right?
Yeah,
I've warned you about that before. What's the first thing you do?
Strong's, then BDB, then Google.
Yeah,
I got
you
you.
only go to the BDB if you can't understand it from the Strongs. The reason why I say that every time is because the BDB has, and we've seen this before, where the BDB will add people's personal perspective. It's not a direct definitional dictionary. We've seen times where it doesn't even have a dictionary when it's talking about a person, it'll say their lineage or who they're possibly connected to. So we have to
Right.
go back and read and find out where it got that from and use it as a tool to search to find out if it's actually right. And it hasn't always been right. Like with Caleb, there were two Calebs we read about. One was the original Caleb, one was generations down the line, as far as we could tell from the context. But in the BDB, it only listed one Caleb, and it said it was the brother of this person. So, keeping that in mind, always start with Strong's Concordance, not with BDB. You took the lazy way out, and that's why you made that mistake.
I got you. So,
All right, go ahead and
100 gold
continue.
bowls. Got 100 gold bowls. Bowls. I don't know why it sounds weird. And then he made the court for the priests, so the area for the priests. Made their doors with brass, and then this part it's worded weird, so I don't. All right, so and he set the sea on the right side of the east and over against the south. Um, he set a large. Hold on. Root meaning roar a sea as breaking up a large surf or a large body of water, specifically Mediterranean. So he set a large body of water.
No. Now, when we read
Or
before
get
about
it
the sea on a bowl, we also read about the oxen being placed how? Three of them on each side, north, south, east, and west, right?
right.
And then we had here, he set the sea on the right side of the east end. Where have we seen a direction of the sea? We've only seen it in
I
one place.
I don't know. I'm blanking right now. I can't call right now.
So, he set the sea on the right side of the east end. So, on the right side, he made a sea or a design of a sea. But he had it to where on its right side, it goes against the south. So, think about a building with four corners.
Right.
You got the north side, then you got the west side, then you got the south, then you got the east. So he set
Right.
a sea on the right side of the east end. Now, if you're looking at the east on that thing, what goes to the right of the east?
Yeah, the east. Like, that would be like southeast.
Yeah, so on the southeast corner, he set the sea.
Okay. I don't know why that was jumbling my brain up so hard.
Now, this could mean a design like the design of sea that we saw on the vase or the giant bowl, but it could also mean the direction that when he built this, he built the building and the sea on the southeast side. of the sea,
I
or
don't
the
know what
way
just
that he
happened.
had it
My
facing.
hold on, real quick. I don't know what just happened, but my connection just disappeared for a second, and all I heard is he could have, and then it blanked out for me.
Okay, so it could be two meanings. Either one, it could mean that he's on that way he set up this building and these candlesticks and all that. That he set it up to where the sea, or the what was it, the Sea of Reeds, I believe, or maybe it's Jordan, the Sea of Jordan. Either way, he set it to where this was set up on the southeast side of it, the direction of it. Or,
Right.
and the more likely option is that there was a sea design on it, and he made sure the sea design faced the southeast end. So imagine you
Okay.
build a table and you had a sea on one corner or one side of the thing, but it goes from the east down to that corner, a little design on it.
Okay.
Let me see if I can find a visual. See if I can find it. No, that's a commentary. Okay, here we go. Let me go ahead and put this on the screen so you guys can kind of see what it's showing. I just found online real quick as a good image of it. Okay, so you can see how the place is placed. You have the lavers right there, you have the priest, you have the menorah, candlesticks, the five on the right side, five on the left side.
Okay.
And there's the altar, the sacrifice over there. Although, let me see if there's one that shows that C. I got a bunch of people. They have pictures of verses, but not of the image of the room. Because that doesn't actually show the C there. Um, no, all these images are too. They're not actually what it looks like, what it's depicting. Okay, so never mind on that. Wait, let me see this. I might have just lever of brass. Yeah, it's not showing it. All right, so that's the best that we can get at this moment. Long story short, if you look towards the right side, the north, south, east, west. So you got the east going towards the south, I mean towards the bottom, and the south going towards the left. So the southeast portion would be that wall that's in the bottom left-hand corner before the porch. Do you see what I'm saying? Chris?
My bad. I didn't know I was
Hello?
muted. Yeah, I see you.
Oh, okay. All right, so that's basically what we're talking about, at least in direction. So there's two possible meanings from it that, from even research online, don't have the actual accurate answer. So either one, he is setting it up so that the sea is on that side, and so he's setting up the building in that way. So the southeast side of the building is where they put the sea, or the way they set up the building. Or it could mean that they had a design of a C on the wall or on the tables, and that faced towards the southeast corner, the bottom left. Those are the
I got you.
possibilities. All right,
All
now
right, for
then,
sure.
back to it. Does anybody have any comments or any questions as we go to the second section? All right, then go ahead, Thomas, when you're ready.
All right, I'll be reading Second Chronicles chapter 4, verses 11 through 15. Give you guys a couple seconds. And Haran made the pots and the shovels and the basins. And Haran finished the work that he was to make for the King Solomon of the house of God, to wit, the two pillars and the pommels and the chapiters, which were on the top of the two pillars, and the two wreaths to cover the two pommels of the chapiters, which were on the top of the pillars, and 400 pomegranates on the two wreaths, 2 rows of pomegranates on each wreath, to cover the two pommels of the chapiters which were upon the pillars. He made also basins, not basins, but bases, right? And lavers, and made
Yeah,
he upon the
basses and lavers.
bases and lavers, made he upon the bases. One
You know, you're
sea,
definitely going to have to look up those to see what it means by basses.
yeah, definitely, I don't know what that is. One sea, and 12 oxen under it. All right, back to verse 11. So we have Haram here making items for King Solomon for the house of the Lord. He's making pots and shovels and basins. And then in 12, so pretty much he finishes the work uh, for Solomon, for the house of the Lord in 11. And then in 12, let me read it.
Now, if you ever see to wit, a little guided thing, you could just read it as to which.
Okay. The two pillars and cemetery. So we got a continuation from 11, and it's also going into speaking on the two pillars, and they have pommels. Let me see. Let me go to swords real quick for that.
Mm-hmm.
A fountain, bowl, or globe. A bowl. What would you prefer in this context?
Well, it says the chapters, right? Now remember what the chapters are.
Right, the top of that goes on top of the pillars.
Exactly. So are we talking about a bowl?
Sorry, you kind of broke up. Would you say?
Are we talking about a bowl?
No, it'd be like decorative.
Yeah. So it's like the curve of it, right?
Okay.
So like when you think of a pillar, how do pillars look when they go to the top? You got where it
Okay.
connects to a flat surface, and then that flat surface connects to the top. But under that
Right.
flat surface, there's always like a little curve that goes into the pillar portion.
Okay. So they're just speaking on like the curvature, like the design, long story short, in regards to the chapter and the pillar. Just reading right now. It says that the two wreaths to cover the pommels. When I look up wreath, it just talks about like victory or hold on.
Oh, here goes the imagery of it. Okay, there we go. Ah, I forgot I can't do it while I got this thing on. Hold on.
Okay, I see what it's saying. All right, so and alongside of that, we have the pommels that are connecting to one another. It's like a pommel is like kind of like branches intertwine, something like you would see like vines in a sense. And yeah, you got that connecting. And then in 13,
All right, so
and
here's the vase and the seed thing that we were talking about before. I'm gonna put a picture on, and then I'll put one of the pillar that we're talking about now. All right, Chris, are you able to see that?
Yeah.
So you see the squiggly lines on it in the top of the middle, the
Yeah.
seed. So that's basically the image is given off of. So we're talking about the design of the vases or the design of them.
Gotcha.
Another image of it would be like this type as I'm about to put on right now. Give me 1 second. Took a while to find that. Like that right there. That's another
Top
image
part,
of it.
like that middle band.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
And then as towards the pillar, let me go ahead. Get one where it's in the middle. So I'm gonna do this so that you guys can basically see the way it might have looked like as one of these pillars that are in the middle. As I'm about to put on the screen right now. So you can see how on this pillar, you can see how when it starts to get to the top, we go from the flat area of the center to where it almost looks like a bowl. You can see that lip right there towards the top. You see that, Thomas?
Yeah.
And then it goes up like a bowl with the sea and everything, or the waves going out, and then it goes to the flat part or the chapiter, which is the crown of it or the top of it. So does that make it a little bit more sense?
Yeah, it does.
All right. Now I'll go ahead and switch it back to your portion.
So I was explaining Reese, which in the Strongs it was mentioned like kind of like vines. So in 13, we got 400 pomegranates on 2 reefs. So it's like hanging from the reefs.
Yep.
Uh,
So think about a
yeah,
vine going around, and every so often you see a pomegranate.
yeah. I was
And
explaining
yeah,
2 rows of the pomegranates on each right. So you got that, and it covers the pomos, the two the curvature, the shapes that we have at the top of the chapters.
here's the better one. This is what I was trying to find. I find it right after you explain that part. I don't love how it
Yeah, go ahead.
works.
Go ahead, do your thing.
Now keep on explaining because I'm about to put a picture on, but you can finish your explanation first.
All right, 14. Give me also this is
Oh no! I thought you still explain that part. I'm about to put it on the screen so this
yeah.
guy can see what it might have looked like. There.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see the reeves or the leaves, which is what it is, on the very top, and you can see the reeves of the vines going through with the pomegranates. It's the same thing as was described in First Kings 7. You guys see that?
Yeah, above and beyond.
Exactly. Although all this was overlaid in gold, not black and white, but that's just because of the way they drew it.
Yeah.
So, anyways, yes. So that's that. And go ahead and explain the bottom part.
Okay. Let me just look up the Strongs real quick.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so 14 is also just in continuation of the things as he made. He made bases, lavers. The lavers were the like he said, tech
What are
bowl,
bases?
literally bases, like a
Mm-hmm.
base for something to sit on. So he made bases and
12
lavers,
oxen underneath it. Yep.
right? And then in 15,
As exampled here. As you can see the
mhm,
C, the one C around it, and then them. All right.
yep, 15, he just showed that 1C and 12 oxen under it. 16, he also made pots, shovels.
You're not in 16. 15
My
is the
bad,
end
my
of
bad, my
yours.
bad. Yeah, yeah. So I finished up. That's the end of my summary. My bad, guys. I was reading
You
out of the
good?
Strongs.
The failures abound. No, I'm just I'm just playing. All right, Charles, are you capable?
Yeah, I'm ready to go. I wish you didn't use that word though.
What you mean?
Because when you said were you capable, I was like, wait, what? Yeah, I'm good, man. Threw me off with that word.
Oh my bad.
I'll be reading so the last section. I'll be reading Second Chronicles chapter 4, verses 16 to 18. To give it a couple seconds. Verse 16. The pots also, and the shovels, and the flesh hooks, and all their instruments did Huram his father make to King Solomon for the house of the Lord of bright brass. In the plain of Jordan did the king cast them in the clay ground between Sukkoth and, let me look this up. Oh, that's a Tser Tsereda. Tser Tserdatha. Or Tserdatha. Tserdatha. There we go. Thus Solomon made all these vessels in great abundance, for the weight of the brass could not be found out. All right, so with my section, I'm finished. Well, I'm talking to. Well, yeah, I am finishing actually. I'm finishing some of the things that Huram had said he was going to do for Solomon. The stuff of bright brass, pots, shovels, flesh hooks. So hooks that you guys probably seen it on TV, YouTube, and anything where the deer hunter puts the deer on a hook. Think of that as the flesh hook. And when he with him making these things, it talked about him in verse 17 casting this stuff in clay ground between Sukkoth and Serdatha. Now, I was totally confused at first when I first read this. I had to YouTube a video of molten brass, a molten metal like gold, silver, and stuff. You can actually put it in a particular type of clay and it won't break. Because when I see clay ground, the first thing I'm thinking about is like clay pots, clay this, clay that. I'm thinking the metal that's already super hot will just destroy the clay. There's particular clay that you can pour the metal in, and the metal will sit and hold in that clay. It won't destroy the clay. And, of course, the metal has to sit in that particular position to, like, let's say what's Huram has like a clay setup where when he pours the brass it'll make a bowl when it's finished like cooling down. That's an example of forming
Well, and
these
they still
different
do
things
this
of brass.
today.
But Matt, I didn't know that it because I've only seen it on metal, I've seen water, I've seen all these different things. I haven't seen it done on clay, like a particular clay before. I had to YouTube
Yeah,
this because I was
yeah,
like clay ground. I was like, that don't even make sense. But then once I
yeah. So they
YouTubed
would
it, I'm like,
set the
oh, it does
shape
make
that they
sense.
want on the ground, and then they would pour the
Uh-huh.
metal in, and here's a little example of some of the shells and I mean the shovels and flesh hooks and the tools and stuff
Which
on the
looks
screen for
nice.
y'all.
And it's funny too because bright brass, doesn't it look like gold from this image?
Well, that's not bright brass. That's more along the side of gold. See, brass is a
Oh,
little bit more silverish. This is just somebody paint when they colored it. They colored it this color. No, no,
it
no.
looks like
Like
an AI image.
no idea.
Okay.
No, not bra, brass. Help if I could spell. All right, so here goes a doorknob that's polished brass. So you can see this is why when they try to say copper, when it's not copper, this is why this makes a difference.
Why would they confuse copper with this? Now I actually know what copper looks like and the coloration and everything. How do you confuse copper with this when copper
Because when
has
they
more of a
redid it for the NIV version and stuff, they changed it to
oh
copper, and people like to keep it because of racism. So
okay no
in the
that
in the word for brass, when they use that for Jesus' skin tone, well, if you change that to bronze or copper, you get a darker skin tone. Now, if his skin tone is bronze, then him being Middle Eastern does not make sense. But if you have it as brass, as it actually was understood as brass, now that skin tone, as you see right there, that's a Middle Eastern skin tone. That's not Caucasian. That's not African. That is Middle Eastern. So when you compare it it makes sense with where he was. But if you do bronze, it allows for people like the Black Hebrew Israelites to be able to say that maybe he was African. I'll give a
yeah, because I heard the
example.
bronze thing, but the copper thing would. I'm glad I heard it after from what you had said, and then what I had did the research on. Had I heard copper first, it would bug me. Um,
Yeah, because here's the difference
um,
between brass and bronze in color tone.
right.
And copper is part of the definition on the BDB side. Copper was another word that it's basically the word for brass, bronze, and copper all have the same root word. in Hebrew.
Right.
There's only small distinctions between each.
But in the way we use copper, the way we see it and everything, it's a huge difference.
Oh, massively. I mean, here's one that's brass. Here's the one that's brass versus copper.
There you go. There you
You can
go.
see the difference between the two. And mind you, you also know it can't be copper because there was no oxidation with these. They would have turned green. That's what happens to copper over time. That's
Mhm.
why the Statue of Liberty is green, because it was made out of copper and the copper oxidized over time. That's why it became green. So the fact that all the stuff we have from Israel and from the temple, none of it turned green, it's brass. Not copper, not bronze, brass. But that's why they want to use those, because you could even see from here. If you were to look at a person with these two different skin tones, where would you say they were from? Well, if you saw the person on the right, you might say they're African. If you saw the person on the left, you would definitely say Middle Eastern.
I was about to say the one on the right looks like extreme suntan or sunburn. I actually dated somebody where she got her sunburn would look like copper. It was that bad.
Yeah.
I would assume that you walked outside and you thought suntan lotion doesn't it doesn't concern you.
Yeah.
You're allergic
So
to
that
suntan lotion.
exactly. So that's the whole point with it and why they want to do that. The whole goal is to pretend that the Bible is racist and to say that Jesus is black and that God's people are black. And it's a whole race thing. It has nothing to do with biblical tenets. And it's not correct. This is why you can't just read any Bible. Like it would be one thing if it wasn't like all throughout the Bible there's a bunch of mistakes in these other ones. And the reason, and I've said this before, and I'll say this again now because the subject came up. And let me put it in the form of question first. I'll ask you guys, Chris, then Thomas, then Charles. Why do we read from the King James and not from any other version?
Can't say I know.
All right, you forgot them. That's why I'm glad I went in this order. Thomas?
It's just different perspectives. That's where it feels feel from. People with different perspectives, and they take their own and make their own version of the Bible.
Nope. Charles?
Doesn't this go back to you brought it up a long time ago? King James, he had a bunch of people like scholars read the Ethiopian or the original and like decipher the
Nope,
Bible.
that's
A bunch of
half of
people
it, but
different.
no.
Oh, that's half of it. Okay.
It does have to do with that. King James Version was the only one that wasn't rewritten to suit people. That is true, but that's not why. Yes, he went to decipher it. He paid for them to decipher. It wasn't written for the Church of England. It actually contradicted a lot of the things that the Church of England taught. The reason that we stick with the King James is because the original dictionary for the Bible was based on the King James Version. So we can go into the original dictionary and be able to find out, is this word that it says in the Old Testament, does it mean the same as we use it today? For example, thou shalt not kill. Does thou shalt not kill actually literally mean thou shalt not kill, Charles?
No.
Exactly. Now, what does it actually mean?
Um, what it actually means is not you going out and committing murders just cause and homicides and all that
There you
stuff.
go. Thou shalt
It's
not
yeah.
murder is what it actually means. Not thou shalt not kill. Because there's multiple situations that the Bible itself says it is okay and you are not in problems for killing somebody. One of them is somebody comes into your house to steal from you and you strike them dead. Not in problems for that. You're not accountable for that. Two, if it's in self defense of you or others, not accountable for that. But you killed them. Yes. But in the dictionary for the Bible, we know it shows thou shalt not kill actually means thou shalt not murder. So the reason we use the King James is not because there's not other good versions. The New King James is not that problematic. New American Standard, though it has problems, it's not as bad as others. But then you get to the NIV that completely changes Jesus' skin tone. And also then you get to the Gen Z Bible, which is completely twacked out. Now we got a problem. And why do people, this question will go to Chris, why do we keep coming out with new versions? Chris?
Uh, I would say to please a certain narrative, I guess.
Not necessarily, but that is one reason, but not entirely. Go ahead, Thomas. What do you think? Why do we keep on coming out with newer versions again and again and again?
To fit people's beliefs and their interpretations of the original.
Not entirely, but again, but that's what Chris said, but that's not the whole story. Charles?
Yeah, I was gonna say what they said.
It's not always to fit a narrative. There are times where they're trying to revamp it so that it's easier for people to understand. And then in the midst of them revamping it, they change things that they don't realize are detrimental to the faith. So half of it is yes, they're changing it so it could fit a narrative or fit a belief they already have. In other words, they're trying to have a false Bible fit their false beliefs. But the other half side of it is they're trying to update it for the new generation. So if we really simplify it, what they're actually trying to do is give people a way out where they don't have to read the original, where they don't have to actually understand what it actually says. And that comes with a lot of problems. You get false doctrines out of it. You get false teachings out of it. And it doesn't necessarily need to be stuff that is like you'll go to hell over. For example, what we were reading about before, the last time we brought up the Gen Z Bible. The main point of that situation had nothing to do with sin or not sin. But the Gen Z Bible turned Jesus into a liar, which debunks the entire thing. Because in the Gen Z Bible, oh no, not the Gen Z Bible, it was another version, but it changed the whole thing from Jesus saying he's not going up to the place at the moment to he's not going at all. And then he ends up going. So we had an actual complication from those other versions through to the Gen Z, where on the Gen Z one, it didn't go as far as the others, but it still gave a completely different context. So it's not always a different doctrine, but you're getting a different understanding of the situation, which impacts how much we're actually able to receive and how much of the severity of what's going on. So yeah, we don't stick to the King James because all the other ones are false. There's a couple other ones you could read and not get false doctrine out of. The New King James is one of them. But the problem is you don't have the dictionary to back up things to be able to go through with it. So when we're going into that, when we're seeing that, we can have the ability, because we read the King James, we can go to the original dictionary. As I tell you guys all the time, when you're going to do the study, what's the first thing you do? You try to figure it out from the context. Okay. If you can't figure it out from the context, you go to the Strong's Concordance. Then you see how it relates into the context. If you can't figure it out from the Strong's Concordance, then you go to the BDB and you see how the BDB fits in line with the Strong's Concordance and how that fits in with the context. And then if you don't have it confirmed, or if you don't understand it fully, then you go to the internet and research it and see where the resources back it up. But you start off in that order because the strongest concordance is the original dictionary. That's why my goal in teaching you guys this stuff, it's not to tell you what the Bible says. It's to show you how to figure it out for yourself. So even though I'm giving you answers, even though I'm teaching you this, I'm not telling you what the Bible is saying. I'm showing you, which means it's not my teachings, it's the Bible's teachings. And that's the difference. All right.
Got it.
Yeah.
Now, with that being said, as Charles put out, yeah, for the weight of the brass could not be found out.
Oh, I didn't
He
get to
has to
explain that
explain
part.
that. Yeah, I know.
Okay. Yeah, so that's just another way when it says for the weight of the brass could not be found out, that's just another way of saying there's just so much of it. What's the point? There's too much of it. What's the point?
Exactly. Now, keep in mind, they were willing to count, I think it was 75 million pounds or 75,000 pounds. No, it was, no, it was 1,000,000. And then we converted it into pounds. So, yeah, it was like 75 million pounds. They were willing to scale that out, but the brass was so much it wasn't worth finding out. How much brass are we talking about?
It's a lot of brass. Probably more brass than most of the countries have in stock.
Right. And consider this too. All that brass and that building, the size of it is not that big. But everything that went into it and the surrounding and everything. Now, when you melt down brass, it becomes real thin. It's easy to work with in that way. So the same amount, a pound of brass, when it's in a solid figure, is not going to be as big when it's melted down. It's going to take up less space. So yeah, it'll shrink down a little bit. But at the same time, we're still talking about a lot of brass there for that building. And figure, like we said, about 105 feet long, about 35 feet wide, and about 35 feet tall. And this was the amount of brass they had. Way more than would be needed to even fill out that building. But that's how much they had to work with. And they didn't just use it for the building, they used it for the tools. They used it. And here, keep in mind too. Let me say this also. Charles, if you were to look at these two colors, the copper and the brass, and then look at the brass and the bronze, which color could you imagine being in a throne room or being alongside with gold more?
I'm glad the I didn't even notice that when I talk and I'm muted, it'll tell me I'm muted. That's interesting. But the one to the left, it would be in the throne room.
Yeah. Because even though it doesn't look exactly like gold, it's bright enough to where it blends in with the gold and still looks like a refined metal. It
Looks
looks
nice too.
fancy. It
Yeah, it
looks
does. It looks.
nice. So you comparatively to look at these, it should be no question about the brass. Yes, we're not talking about bronze here. Yes, the bronze would look good, but compared to the brass looks like a color fit for royalty. The bronze, it looks like something you'd put on a mahogany table. That's what it looks like. An outer lining of just an average table. Would you put, Thomas, the brass, would you put that on a regular dining table?
Yeah, definitely.
You funny. Could you imagine what and Thomas, actually let me go to Chris with this last question since we're about to pray it out soon. What kind of person would you think a person is if they had an average wood table, but they had a brass outer lining of it? What would that make you think about the person?
You said a regular table with a regular wood table with a brass outline.
Yeah, like they put the brass all around just a basic table. What would that make you think of that person?
Um, I don't know. Kind of got some good taste, but they just ain't got funds for it. I don't know what you mean by that.
Exactly. No, that's exactly it. They have a taste for riches, but they can't afford the riches. See, this is the thing about putting fancy things with lesser things. You see the contrast between it. If you saw a hotel elevator that had the bronze and had the copper, you might think like, okay, this elevator, they want to keep it nice or whatever. But if you saw an elevator with the brass in it, oh, they're trying to make sure it looks fancy. The first thing that comes to mind with the bright metals is a fanciness. Even if it wasn't brass, if it was silver, a bright silver with a gold, it would make sense, but the copper doesn't make as much sense. So when we look at it from a design perspective, if you put a something that costs or looks like it costs a lot next to something that looks like it don't cost that much, it gives an impression that you're trying to pretend you got money when you don't. That you're giving off a false impression that maybe you ain't got it like you're trying to pretend. And that's the
The,
point.
the Mandalay Bay does it when the sun shines off their building. If you ever noticed, the
Yeah,
Mandalay Bay is a perfect example of what you're bringing up because they set it up that way, but then they're next door to two trash property.
exactly. The Mandalay Bay looks like this fancy building. It looks fine dining on the outside, especially when the sun glistens off of it. But then you look at the Luxor, or you look at the Excalibur. Excalibur looks like garbage compared to Mandalay Bay. Luxor don't look as good as the Mandalay Bay. Bright metals seem fancier, look fancier than darker metals. And this is why a lot of times, like people, and I hate to put it this way, but this is the imagery where people who are racist, they get that distinction of dark being lesser than light. I don't know if you guys knew that. White as a color scheme, it represents innocence. Brightness of metals and brightness of things represent fineness or refinedness. So every time that you see racism, they always do that attribute, always, even if it's in the same nation. In India, if you're a darker skinned Indian over a lighter skinned Indian, there was a lot of pulling down and treating worse for the darker skinned Indians. It's because that concept of the bright metals or the bright colors are more vibrant to them and they seem like more not inspired, but how could I put it? To They sing like more refined metals than the darker metals or the darker colors. So they take that to the extreme and they take it out of its context and out of way to say that even darker skinned people are lesser. Now, in reality and in the Bible, white, black makes no difference, has nothing to do with the metals. But the metals do give that impression of better for the bright than the dark. But it has nothing to do with people. But if, in case you guys didn't know historically, that is part of the reason. Brighter stuff was always looked at as more refined or nicer. darker stuff was looked at as worse. Same thing with demonic, same thing with those. So they would transfer that and use their racism to use it against people to say that black skinned or dark skinned people were lesser. That was part of their excuses. Little history lesson note on that. Don't know if you guys knew that. But back to the main point, we do see the difference in the quality of the metals. Now, back to the third point. Now, does anybody have any comments or any questions before we pray it out? All right. And let me get all of you to answer first before we pray it out. Chris, then Thomas, then Charles. Do you guys know that about the historics with racism and where that like darker and lighter came from?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Yeah, I heard along the lines of that, but just not that in depth.
Okay. Yeah, if you ever get a chance, it's actually a real interesting thing to look up of where it all stems from and all that. It stems from precious metals, it stems from clothing, and it stems from the way things brightness would seem versus darkness, and also it stems from a fear of the dark. Like even back then in like way beyond even like to the biblical times and stuff when people would still be afraid of the dark. So you think about darkness and then think about and they would transfer that same feeling and that same connection of color schemes to actually racism. Like if you ever look at what each color represents when people use it in artistry and different motions and stuff, it's crazy the way things depict. White is a color of innocence, purple is a color of royalty, gold is a color of deity, all things like that. So, anyways, and Charles, did you know that about that history with that?
No, I've heard like references and jokes, but I didn't know the history to it.
Yeah. So, anyways, with all that being said, does anybody have any other comments or questions before we pray it out? All right, then Charles, go ahead and pray us out.
All right, everybody, go ahead and bow your heads. Father, now that we got through for the study of the details of the different things, different utensils, pillars, chapters, and the different metals that they were used. We got good practice out of that, good notes and reminders because we did go through this before in Kings. I pray that as we continue to go through these Bible studies, that we'll be able to, when we get the context, we'll be able to kind of break it down in a way where anybody could understand if they, come on the Bible studies. And to also, you know what? No, I'm taking it too far. That's the end. In Jesus' name, amen.
That's the end.
No, I didn't want to. Well, remember, Matt. Sometimes I take the prayers. I take it a little, to the point
Yep,
where now
I
I'm
was
losing
about
focus
to
for it. So
correct
I
you.
had to, I had to stop myself. So
Because it seemed like you were trying to figure out what to pray next would defeat the
yeah,
whole
that's why I
purpose.
stopped myself. Right, that's why I stopped myself.
Good. All right, everybody. Well, have a wonderful night, and I will see Chris and Charles tomorrow. And I will see you guys all for worship.
Yeah.
All right, y'all.